Close your eyes. Picture a ninja. What do you see? A figure dressed in black from head to toe, only the eyes visible, moving silently across a rooftop in the dead of night. He carries a straight sword on his back. He throws shuriken shaped like stars. He vanishes in a puff of smoke. He can walk on water, fly through the air, and turn invisible. Now picture a samurai. What do you see? A warrior in elaborate armor, 2 swords at his waist, bound by a strict code of honor called Bushido. He would rather die than retreat. He would rather commit ritual suicide than be captured. He fights face to face, in broad daylight, with courage and dignity. These 2 images are burned into our minds by decades of movies, video games, comic books, and anime. They are iconic. They are unforgettable. And they are almost entirely wrong. Almost everything you think you know about ninjas and samurai, about their relationship, about their weapons, about their codes of honor, about their very existence, is a myth. But beautiful, thrilling, deeply entertaining myth. But a myth nonetheless. The historical reality is far stranger, far more complex, and far more fascinating than the fiction. Today, we are going to strip away the Hollywood nonsense and uncover the truth. Shinobi versus samurai. The historical reality behind the myth. Let us start with the most fundamental misconception of all, the idea that ninjas and samurai were sworn enemies, locked in an eternal struggle between shadow and light, between honor and deception. In reality, most ninjas were samurai. Let me say that again. Most ninjas were samurai. The shinobi, as they were actually called in historical Japan, were not a separate class of warriors. They were not outcasts, peasants, or rebels fighting against the samurai elite. They were the samurai elite. The arts of the shinobi, espionage, sabotage, infiltration, assassination were specialized skills practiced by samurai warriors in service to their lords. The same man who fought honorably on the battlefield with sword and bow could, on another night, be creeping into an enemy castle disguised as a servant, gathering intelligence, or setting fires. This was not seen as dishonorable. It was seen as necessary. It was war by other means. The rigid separation between the honorable samurai and the dishonorable ninja is a modern invention, a fantasy created by movies and novels that has no basis in historical fact. To understand how this myth was born, and why it has become so powerful, we have to travel back in time to the war-torn landscapes of medieval Japan and meet the real men and women behind the mask. To the world that created the shinobi. Japan's Age of War. The era that gave birth to the shinobi is called the Sengoku Jida, the Age of Warring States. It lasted from roughly 1467 to 1615, nearly 150 years of near constant civil war. The central government in Kyoto had collapsed. The emperor was a figurehead, a puppet without power. The real power lay with the daimyo, the feudal lords who ruled their own territories like independent kings. Each daimyo had his own army, his own castles, his own laws, and each daimyo was constantly plotting to expand his territory at the expense of his neighbors. Alliances were made and broken. Betrayal was not a crime, it was a strategy. A lord you fought beside today might be your mortal enemy tomorrow. In a world like this, the traditional rules of warfare were no longer sufficient. Battles were no longer decided solely by the courage of samurai warriors charging at each other with swords. They were decided by information, by knowing where your enemy's armies were, by knowing which of his vassals could be bribed, by knowing the layout of his castles, the weaknesses in his defenses, the morale of his troops. The daimyo who had the best intelligence network had a massive advantage over his rivals. And so, the art of the shinobi was born, not as a mystical ninja clan hidden in the mountains, but as a practical, professional discipline of espionage and irregular warfare, developed and practiced by samurai themselves. The word shinobi is the Japanese reading of the Chinese characters that can also be read as ninja. Shinobi means to sneak or to endure. It was not the name of a specific group. It was a job description. A shinobi was a person who practiced the skills of stealth, infiltration, and information gathering. The samurai who practiced these skills were known by many names. Shinobi Mano, Tapan, Vapam, Kyusa. Each of these terms referred to slightly different types of covert operatives. The Sapa were scouts and infiltrators. The Rappa specialized in spreading disinformation and propaganda. The Kyusa were agents who embedded themselves in enemy territory for long periods, sometimes years, living as farmers, merchants, or priests, gathering intelligence. All of these roles were filled by samurai, or by people under the direct command of samurai. The idea that ninjas were a separate, lower-class group fighting against the samurai is completely false. The shinobi were an integral part of the samurai military system. They were the eyes and ears of the daimyo. They were the shadow warriors who did the dirty work that open warfare could not accomplish, and they were respected, feared, and well compensated for their skills. 14.0.24.0 Part 3 The Ninja Myth: How Hollywood Invented the Black Pajamas. So, if the historical shinobi were samurai spies and infiltrators, where did the image of the black-clad ninja come from? Why do we picture a figure in a mask and tight black clothing, sneaking through the night? The answer lies in the art of Japanese theater, and in the fertile imaginations of modern filmmakers. In traditional Japanese kabuki theater, stagehands were dressed entirely in black. The audience understood that these figures were invisible. They were part of the background, not part of the action. A clever playwright had an idea. What if a character in the play was supposed to be a spy, someone moving unseen? He could be dressed as a stagehand. The audience would understand the visual language. They would know that this character was, in the world of the play, invisible to the other characters. And so, the first ninja costume was born, not as a historical uniform, but as a theatrical convention. Over time, this theatrical image became associated with the historical shinobi. The black costume, which was never worn by actual shinobi in the field, became the definitive ninja outfit. Actual shinobi did not wear black pajamas. It wore whatever would allow them to blend in. If the mission was to infiltrate a castle at night, they might wear dark blue or dark gray, colors that blend into the shadows better than pure black. In a moonlit environment, pure black actually stands out as a silhouette. If the mission was to gather intelligence in a village, they would dress as a farmer, a merchant, a traveling priest, or a performer. The whole point was to look unremarkable, to be invisible by being ordinary. The theatrical ninja costume is a perfect example of how a visual convention invented for the stage became so powerful that it erased historical reality. Today, even in Japan, the black-clad ninja is the dominant image, and Hollywood has, of course, taken this theatrical invention and amplified it into a global phenomenon. The ninja movies of the 1980s, the Ninja Turtles, the countless video games where ninjas are supernatural warriors with magical powers, all of this is built on a foundation of fantasy. The real shinobi would not recognize themselves in any of it. But the myth-making did not stop with the costume. The weapons associated with ninjas are also largely fictional or misunderstood. Take the shuriken, the famous throwing star. Did historical shinobi use shuriken? Yes, they did. But not the way you think. The shuriken was not a primary weapon. It was a secondary tool, used for distraction and harassment. The most common type of shuriken was not the star shape, but the bow shuriken, a simple, straight, sharpened spike. These were small, easily concealed, and could be thrown quickly to distract an enemy or slow down a pursuer. The star-shaped shuriken, the shaken, didn't exist, but it was one of many varieties. And the idea that shuriken were coated with deadly poison that could kill instantly is mostly Hollywood. Poison was used, but it was rarely as dramatic or fast-acting as the movies suggest. Another famous ninja weapon is the straight sword, the ninjato, often depicted as a short, straight blade worn on the back. Did the historical shinobi use straight swords? Almost certainly not. Japanese swordsmithing produced curved blades. The katana, with its elegant curve, was the standard sword of the samurai class. The straight ninja sword seen in movies is a modern invention, created because it looks cool and distinctive. A shinobi, if he carried a sword at all, would have carried a standard katana or a shorter wakizashi, just like any other samurai, and he would have worn it at his waist, not on his back, because drawing a sword from the back is slow and awkward. 24.0.34.0 Part 4 The Real Shinobi Arsenal Tools of the Trade. If the shinobi did not use the weapons we associate with them, what did they actually use? The answer is that they used tools of stealth, infiltration, and practical utility, not flashy weapons of assassination. The real shinobi arsenal was a toolkit for getting into places and getting out alive. Climbing equipment was essential. The shuko and ashiko, spiked metal bands worn on the hands and feet, allowed the shinobi to climb wooden walls, trees, and even stone surfaces. The kajinao, a grappling hook attached to a rope, was used for scaling walls and for crossing gaps. The mizugumo, often described as water walking shoes, were actually flotation devices used to cross swampy or marshy ground. The idea that they allowed the shinobi to walk on water is pure myth. Disguise and concealment tools were also critical. The shinobi carried small saws, files, and chisels for cutting through walls and locks. They used listening devices, hollowed-out wooden tubes or metal plates, to eavesdrop on conversations. They carried fire-starting kits, including flint and tinder, because arson was one of the most common and effective shinobi tactics. Setting fire to an enemy's supplies or castle could do more damage than 100 sword blows. They also used smoke bombs, not to vanish magically, but to create confusion and cover a retreat. The smoke was produced by a mixture of gunpowder, hack, and other ingredients, packed into a small container. It was a practical, if limited, tool. The shinobi were also masters of chemistry and herbalism. They developed medicines to keep themselves alive and alert during long missions. They used a preparation of black sesame seeds, ginseng, and other herbs to stave off hunger and fatigue. They carried a small packet of medicinal herbs to treat wounds. They knew how to purify water. They knew which plants were edible and which were poisonous. The legendary shinobi diet, often claimed to be a special regimen to keep them lean and agile, was probably just the normal diet of a mountain-dwelling Japanese person of the time. Rice, millet, vegetables, and occasionally fish or game. Nothing magical. Just practical. The most important weapon of the shinobi was not a sword or a shuriken. It was information. The shinobi were intelligence operatives first and foremost. Their job was to gather knowledge about the enemy and bring it back to their lord. They were trained to observe, to remember, and to report accurately. They learned to read the movements of troops, the layout of fortifications, the dynamics of a corps. They were the eyes and ears of the daimyo, and the daimyo who employed them understood their value. 34-0-40-40. Part 5. The Samurai Honor. Myth. In reality. How? Let us turn to the samurai. The image of the samurai as a warrior of absolute honor, bound by the code of Bushido, willing to die at any moment rather than face dishonor, is one of the most powerful and enduring archetypes in world culture. It is also a heavily romanticized, historically oversimplified, and partially fabricated image. The samurai were a social class, not a uniform group of noble warriors. They were the military aristocracy of feudal Japan. They served the lord, fought his battles, and in return received land, stipends, and status. They were highly trained in martial arts, particularly archery, swordsmanship, and horsemanship. They were, by any measure, an elite warrior class. But were they all honorable? Did they all follow a strict code of conduct? The answer is far more complicated than the myth suggests. The code of Bushido, the way of the warrior, as we know it today, was largely formulated in the Edo period, after the age of the samurai wars had already ended. It was a nostalgic, idealized reconstruction of samurai values, created during a time of peace when samurai were no longer fighting on battlefields but working as bureaucrats and administrators. During the actual age of war, the Sengoku Jidai, samurai behavior was far more pragmatic. Betrayal, assassination, ambush, and deception were all standard tools of warfare, used by samurai against samurai. The idea that a samurai would never attack from behind, never use trickery, never break his word, is a fantasy. History is full of samurai who switched sides in the middle of a battle, who poisoned their rivals, who assassinated their lords to seize power. The samurai were warriors in a brutal, chaotic time. They did what they had to do to survive and win. The relationship between samurai and shinobi was not one of opposition. It was one of integration. The shinobi arts were a specialized skill set within the broader samurai military tradition. A daimyo would not hire a separate ninja clan to do his dirty work. He would assign the task to his own trusted samurai, men who had trained in the skills of infiltration and espionage. Some samurai were known for their expertise in these arts. They wrote manuals, taught students, and passed down their knowledge through generations. The most famous of these manuals is the Bansen Shukai, a comprehensive guide to the art of the shinobi, compiled in the 17th century. It covers everything from philosophy and strategy to practical techniques of climbing, swimming, disguise, and intelligence gathering. The Bansen Shukai makes it clear that the shinobi is a samurai, operating under the orders of his lord, adhering to a strict ethical code of his own. The primary virtue of the shinobi, according to the manual, is loyalty. The shinobi must be willing to endure any hardship, face any danger, and, if necessary, die in obscurity, without recognition or glory, for the sake of his mission and his lord. This is a warrior's code, not a criminal's. 44-0-50-40. Part 6. The Ida and Koka, the famed shinobi regions. No discussion of the shinobi would be complete without mentioning Iga and Koka. These two mountainous regions, in what is now Mai and Shiga prefectures, are legendary as the homeland of the ninja. According to popular myth, Iga and Koka were remote, independent regions where the ninja clans developed their secret arts, free from the control of the daimyo, forming a kind of ninja republic in the mountains. The historical reality, as always, is more nuanced. Ida and Koka were indeed known for producing excellent shinobi operatives. The mountainous terrain, The relative isolation and the tradition of local self-defense created an environment where the skills of irregular warfare flourished. The warriors of Iga and Koko were renowned for their expertise in guerrilla tactics, explosives, and unconventional warfare. But they were not independent ninja clans. They were samurai families, organized into leagues and alliances, who sold their services to the warring daimyo. They were mercenaries, essentially, highly skilled, highly sought-after mercenaries, who commanded high prices for their unique abilities. The most famous episode in the history of Iga is the Tensho Iga War, fought between 1579 and 1581, when the forces of the powerful warlord Oda Nobunaga invaded the region. Nobunaga was the most ruthless and ambitious daimyo of his age, a man determined to unify all of Japan under his rule. The independent-minded warriors of Iga were an obstacle to his plans. The war was brutal. Nobunaga's forces, vastly outnumbering the defenders, swept through Iga, burning villages, destroying temples, and killing thousands. The Iga warriors, for all their shinobi skills, could not stand against the full might of a professional army. The myth of the invincible ninja was shattered by the reality of gunpowder and overwhelming force. After the fall of Iga, the surviving shinobi families dispersed. Many of them entered the service of Nobunaga's successor, Tokugawa Ieyasu, who would go on to become the shogun and unify Japan. The Iga and Koko shinobi became part of the Tokugawa security apparatus, serving as guards, spies, and intelligence operatives. The age of the independent shinobi mercenary was over. The age of the institutionalized shinobi had begun. 54064. Part 7. Famous shinobi. The real lives behind the legends. The most famous shinobi in Japanese history is a man named Hattori Hanzo. You might know the name from the movie Kill Bill, where Hattori Hanzo is a retired master swordsmith who crafts the ultimate katana. The real Hattori Hanzo was a samurai from Iga, a master of the shinobi arts, who served the Tokugawa clan with distinction. He was born in 1542, the son of a minor samurai family. He fought in numerous battles, led covert operations, and was instrumental in helping Tokugawa Ieyasu escape from a dangerous situation during the chaotic aftermath of Oda Nobunaga's assassination in 1582. Hanzo led a group of Iga shinobi who guided Ieyasu through the mountains to safety, a mission that cemented his reputation and the loyalty of the Tokugawa to the Iga warriors. Hanzo was not a shadowy figure in a black mask. He was a respected samurai general, a man of honor and loyalty, who just happened to be exceptionally skilled in the arts of espionage and irregular warfare. He died peacefully, an old man, his legacy secure. The ninja myth has transformed him into a superhero, a mystical warrior with supernatural powers. But the real Hattori Hanzo was more interesting. He was a human being, operating at the highest levels of power, using his intelligence, courage, and skills to shape the course of Japanese history. Another famous shinobi is Fujibayashi Nagato, a leader of the Edo shinobi during the Tensho Iga War. He fought against Nobunaga's forces and was killed in the conflict. His descendants compiled much of the knowledge that would eventually become the Bansen Shukai. Then there's Mochizuki Chiyo, a woman who was often described as the leader of a network of female shinobi, or kunoichi. The historical evidence for Chiyo is sketchy, but the legend says she recruited and trained a network of women who posed as shrine maidens, servants, and entertainers to gather intelligence for the Takeda clan. Female operatives were certainly used in espionage, and the idea of the kunoichi is not entirely fictional. Women could move through spaces and access information that men could not, but the image of the kunoichi as a seductive assassin in a tight black outfit is, once again, a modern fantasy. The real female operatives were likely as varied and practical as their male counterparts. They used their intelligence and social skills, not their bodies, as their primary weapons. The stories of these historical figures have been layered with centuries of myth-making. Separating fact from fiction is difficult, but the effort is worthwhile. The real shinobi were not superheroes, they were professionals. They were samurai who specialized in the unglamorous, essential work of intelligence and irregular warfare. 64074. Part 8. The ninja boom. How a historical footnote became a global phenomenon. The modern ninja myth, the image that dominates our popular culture, is a product of the 20th century. In the Edo period, the shinobi faded from relevance. Japan was at peace. There were no more wars to fight. The shinobi skills were preserved in manuals and taught in a few specialized schools, but the need for them had passed. Then, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Japan underwent a dramatic transformation. The Meiji Restoration ended the feudal system, abolished the samurai class, and opened Japan to the West. Westerners became fascinated with Japanese culture, and Japanese nationalists sought to promote a romanticized image of their history. The samurai, with their code of honor, became a symbol of Japanese identity, and the ninja, the shadow warrior, became a figure of mystery and intrigue. The first wave of ninja popularity came in the form of novels and kabuki plays that featured ninja as magical, almost superhuman characters. These stories were pure entertainment, with little connection to historical reality. The second wave came after World War II, when Japan was occupied by American forces and Japanese culture was being introduced to a global audience. American just stationed in Japan heard stories of the ninja and brought them home. The ninja began to appear in comic books, B-movies, and television shows. The real explosion, the ninja boom that created the modern myth, happened in the 1980s. A series of American ninja movies, starring actors like Sho Kosugi and Michael Dudikoff, turned the black-clad ninja into a global icon. These movies were wildly successful, and they established the visual vocabulary that we still associate with ninjas today. The black suit, the mask, the straight sword, the shuriken, the smoke bombs, the mystical powers. Then came the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a cartoon and comic book franchise that took the ninja myth and made it accessible to children. The Turtles were funny, relatable, and wildly popular. They cemented the ninja in the global imagination. Video games followed: Ninja Gaiden, Tenchu, Naruto. Each generation has had its own version of the ninja myth, each adding new layers of fantasy to the already heavily fictionalized image. The historical shinobi, the samurai spies and infiltrators of the Sengoku period, have been almost completely obscured by their pop culture descendants. The ninja of our imagination is a modern creation, a hybrid of theatrical convention, Japanese folklore, and American action movie aesthetics. He is a powerful symbol, but he is not real. 740-840. Art 9 Shinobi vs. Samurai: The Final Verdict. So, after all of this, what is the real relationship between shinobi and samurai? The answer is that the question itself is based on a false premise. It is like asking, what is the difference between a Navy SEAL and an American soldier? A Navy SEAL is an American soldier. The SEALs are a specialized unit within the broader military. The shinobi were a specialized type of samurai. They were the intelligence operatives, the infiltrators, the saboteurs. They operated in the shadows, not because they were dishonorable outcasts, but because their work required secrecy. The samurai who fought in open battle and the shinobi who gathered intelligence were often the same men, serving the same lords, fighting the same wars. There is no grand conflict between ninja and samurai. There is no eternal struggle between shadow and light. There is only war. And in war, all tools are used. The samurai who fought with honor on the battlefield was not dishonored by employing spies and saboteurs. He was being practical. He was being smart. He was doing what was necessary to win. The myth of the ninja versus samurai conflict persists because it is a good story. It taps into deep archetypes: the rebel against the establishment, the underdog against the powerful, the cunning against the strong. We love stories where the little guy wins using cleverness and skill. The ninja, in his black pajamas, armed with his throwing stars and smoke bombs, defeating the armored samurai with his rigid code of honor, is a satisfying fantasy. But it is a fantasy. The historical reality is that the shinobi were part of the establishment. They were the eyes and ears of the powerful. They did not fight against the system. They were the system. The peasants and farmers who occasionally rebelled against their samurai overlords were not ninjas. They were desperate people with farm tools and sharpened sticks, and they were crushed with brutal efficiency. The romantic image of the ninja as a freedom fighter is a modern projection, not a historical fact. 840-940. R10 The Legacy: Why the Myth Matters. Why does any of this matter? Why spend so much time debunking a harmless myth? Because the myth of the ninja and the myth of the samurai are not just entertainment. They are stories we tell ourselves about honor, about loyalty, about the nature of warfare, about the relationship between means and ends. When we believe that samurai were noble warriors bound by an unbreakable code of honor, we buy into a romanticized vision of war that obscures its brutal, chaotic, and morally compromised reality. When we believe that ninjas were magical assassins with supernatural powers, we diminish the real achievements of the men and women who develop the arts of intelligence and irregular warfare. The real shinobi were not superheroes. They were professionals operating in a dangerous world. Their skills were the product of training, discipline, and intelligence, not mysticism. The real samurai were not paragons of virtue. They were human beings, capable of great courage and great cruelty, living in a time of constant war. Understanding the reality behind the myth does not make the story less interesting. It makes it more interesting. The truth is always more complex, more nuanced, and more human than the fiction. The real Hattori Hanzo, the samurai general who led his men through the mountains to save his lord, is a more compelling figure than any cartoon ninja. The real shinobi of Iga and Koka, who fought and died defending their homes against overwhelming odds, are more heroic than any movie character. The history is there, waiting to be discovered. The myth is entertaining. The reality is fascinating. So, the next time you see a ninja in a movie, leaping across rooftops in a black suit, throwing shuriken with impossible accuracy, remember the truth. Remember the samurai in plain clothes, disguised as a farmer, walking into an enemy village to count the soldiers and map the defenses. Remember the spy who spent years living under a false identity, waiting for the moment to send a critical piece of intelligence to his lord. Remember the men and women who practiced the real art of the shinobi, the art of patience, the art of observation, the art of endurance. That is the true legacy of the shinobi. Not the smoke and the stars, the patience, the intelligence, the quiet, unglamorous, essential work of knowing your enemy. That is something worth remembering. Part 11. Closing the shadow and the sword. Imagine a man standing on a hilltop in feudal Japan. The sun is setting. The valley below is darkening. He is not wearing a black suit. He is wearing the rough clothes of a traveling merchant. He carries no sword, no shuriken. His weapons are his eyes, his ears, his memory. He has spent the past week in a castle town below, posing as a seller of herbal medicines. He has counted the guards. He has noted the times of the patrols. He has identified the weak point in a castle wall. He has gathered the information his lord needs to plan an attack. Now he slips away into the darkness, walking quietly down the mountain path. His mission complete. No one will ever know his name. No one will ever write a song about him. He will not be remembered as a hero, but his work, his quiet, patient, dangerous work, has changed the course of a war. He is a shinobi. He is a samurai. He is a servant of his lord. He is a shadow, and the shadow, Anana, is as important as the sword. Thank you for watching. If you made it to the end of this journey into the shadows, you have my gratitude. Please leave a comment. Tell me which myth surprised you the most. Like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who still thinks ninjas wore black pajamas. I will see you in the next one.